Everybody, and welcome back to the Business of Business podcast, Two Daughters and Their Dad. I'm your host, Stacey J. Dempsey. And like always, I have with me one of the other daughters in the one and only dad. Good morning, good afternoon to the
Good
both of you
morning.
and to all of our viewers and our listeners.
Morning. Good afternoon.
Here we are. Thank you all so very much for tuning in with us today. Today, we want to talk a little bit about, want to talk a lot about, what is our system when addressing negative reviews, negative feedback about our business, or poor performance? How do we address it? How do we make it right? Do we have a system in place? What does that system look like? And if we don't have a system, what can it look like? There's so many different ways now that people can not only connect with us, but also say something about us. And, just a few years ago, something negative online was like, oh man, it was almost like a knife to the stomach, because nobody wants a bad review. Clearly, if we're all out here working hard, doing our very best, we don't want to hear something negative about our business. But nowadays, that's a little bit different. Times have changed a little bit on how we can address feedback, on some negative comments or reviews when it comes to our business. So, Jen, why don't you start out a little bit, because you gave a really good example of just a few years ago how you viewed maybe some negative
Yeah, I
feedback
mean, when I
versus
first opened my
now.
business almost 10 years ago, like you said, Stace, getting a bad review was like, I mean, it really knocked me down. And then, like we always say, as you kind of
Yeah.
weather the storm and, challenges come up, you get better at handling certain things. And I think if you ask any marketing expert, one thing that I've learned is that, you know, going on Google and having all five-star reviews is just not, it's not authentic, it's not realistic. It's unrealistic to think that everyone is always going to be happy with you and your business and the customer service, right? We know if you are in business dealing with consumers, you know that there's just some people, no matter what you do, no matter what you say, you can't make them happy. And, we're human, right? So inside of our businesses, I'm sure we make mistakes, we drop the ball. I always say, like, we don't show up to work every day wanting to disappoint someone or wanting to do a bad job. Obviously, my intention is I want everyone to love their hair when they leave my salon. I want them to feel better about themselves. So when there is a negative situation or a negative review, it really it's important to me that we figure out really the root of the problem and how it went wrong and how we can address it. Over the past 10 years, I mean, I've been blackmailed into doing things that went against what I thought was the right thing to do just because there was a threat of I'm going to leave you a bad review if you don't dot dot dot, right? So I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to suck it up, take it to the chin because I don't want a bad review. But like I said, now we know across the board that you're not always going to get a perfect review. And it's actually helpful in some ways to have different kind of feedback on your platforms where people can leave reviews. I know inside of my business, every time someone checks out, just my software, we want them to give us a review. So we send them something to give us feedback. And that's something that I monitor weekly. That's something that my stylists that work here can see that. And so we can kind of navigate, like I said, what that means and what the next steps are. And so, you know, for I want to say the first few years in business, for example, if someone was not happy with their hair, I took it really personal. And as the business owner, as a hairdresser, I would automatically jump in, tweak it, fix their hair, whatever it is that they wanted done, I would personally be responsible to do because I wanted to make them happy. And then I started to learn that that was not helping the business grow, that was not helping my stylist grow. And so we started to put parameters and systems in place. That way, number one, when someone new comes into our business, they read these policies and they sign off on it, right? So they know we have a 7-day grace period. So if there's something you're unhappy with, if we didn't cut your bangs short enough, you have 7 days to contact us to come back in, and you are going to get the same stylist. Now, with those policies in place, we're always going to have one or two, and we just have to be flexible and nimble in some of those respects. But when it comes to negative feedback, positive feedback, I'm not a believer that the customer is always right. Not in 2025, guys. That the business model is out the window because as you can imagine, I speak to a lot of people, I deal with a lot of people, and there's some really Looney Tunes out here that are just reaching for something that is just not attainable. And there's just nothing you can do to make them happy. So, like I said, I don't think having negative reviews are a bad thing. It's a way for us to reassess, come up with new systems, be creative, and make sure that the business is moving forward in that way. And I don't think that it's always the business owner's responsibility to fix those problems. Dad, what do you think?
Well, I agree completely. And I think one of the important components though is, if you do get negative feedback, bad reviews, don't hide from it. And this was a few years ago. I had a client that one of their truck drivers caused some damage to a historic bridge over in Pennsylvania. And a lot of people really raised a lot of negative publicity on their social media sites, and about the whole incident. And their initial reaction was to take down their social media. After we talked about it, I suggested to them that, don't do that, put that back up and address it in the social media, which they did. And it really turned around that, then the comments started coming back. Well, thank you for taking responsibility. We appreciate the fact that you're addressing this. So had they just been silent, that's what would have been kind of out there. Because they dialogued with it, it really took a negative and turned it into less of a negative. Maybe not a positive, but less of a negative. So I think that was a good lesson, to don't, if it's a legitimate situation, take responsibility, and address it, and not run from it. But I agree with you, Jen. I think that in today's world, you have to be very careful because, it's just so easy. It's so easy for people who, are just looking for ways to get something possibly for nothing. I mean, let's face it. I mean, sometimes business owners will get so nervous around negative publicity, they're willing to try to fix it being, by being, okay, well, we'll give you something for free. Um, you know, we'll give you the product for free. We'll give you we'll refund for the service. And so you just have to be careful because there are, like in everything else, there's those kind of people out there. But don't be afraid to address that either, with that particular client or customer. But, it's just engagement, I think, is the key, is being engaged in your social media to the point where, I mean, I am grateful because we have people looking at it. I have Janet, our marketing consultant. So we rarely get one, thankfully. But when something does come up, because I'm not tracking it every day, I'm not looking at all that every day, but somebody is. So that way, if something does come up, it can be addressed either through contacting the client or whatever those next steps need to be. Um, just don't set your social media out there and don't ever look and say, oh, I didn't even know that was out there. I didn't even know I got that bad review and it's been out there for 2 weeks. Be engaged with it somehow, some way, whether it's yourself or someone on your team or whatever the case may be.
I mean, the other benefit too to making sure what I was gonna say was, the benefit also to making sure that you reply or respond in some way, shape, or form, especially if that feedback is in the form of a review or a comment, is that Thankfully, we live in a world of technology that now anybody that comes that might see that comment and your response, if they're anything like me, I'm gonna go and say, "Well, let me check out the person that left this nasty review." Because as much as a business can be out there, and again, your social media is a business, your website, it's supposed to tell a story. So if someone's truly looking at your whole story to maybe make a decision on whether or not they want to do business with you, if they're anything like me, which I think most people are, they are going to say, well, let me see who made this nasty review. And as much as things can follow us as a business, things follow individuals as well, because there have been plenty of times where I have, clicked on the person that wrote that nasty review and clearly and very quickly saw that they leave nasty reviews. These people are just unhappy in life because they can't be that one person that just always has a problem every place they go into. So I say that to say, then you know what? I really discredit what they think, their review. It doesn't matter. But what I don't discredit is the fact that the business said, hey, listen, we're really, really sorry if this was your experience. Why don't you connect with us so we can make it right, or we can talk this, we can figure something out. So it can work also in our favor that someone leaves us even say if it's a negative review and it's not legitimate. But if it's a negative review and it is legitimate, it really can benefit us both ways in our business. So like Dad said, making sure that you respond and keeping in mind too that you have different platforms, and different platforms might require maybe a little different tone of response, where then we can go to something like Chat GPT and say, hey, listen, how I want to respond on Facebook might be a little different on TikTok. What's the audience on my Facebook versus my TikTok that maybe I need to be a little more polished in one area, but in another, I can really kind of say what I need to say, if you know
No,
what I
that's
mean.
okay.
So
I think what
go
can
ahead,
be
Jen, before I
frustrating for
so
business
rudely cut you
owners,
off.
is in the moment, if you have someone inside of your business and they don't speak up, right? So if they're unhappy with their service in some way and they don't speak up when they're there and then they leave and then they want to post it online on Google, on Yelp, and you're like, well, if you had addressed it when you were here, we could have made this right and we could have skipped all of this, right? So that's always going to be kind of like a frustrating piece to all of this. And the good thing about technology is whether you're doing it or you have someone in your business doing it, you know, if someone
Yeah, that's right, Jen. And you might be frozen just a smidge on my end, at least. But also, what I think is important to remember is that, even though we have these different platforms and being able to respond to, say, a negative review that maybe it's not legitimate, let's talk about what's the system in place, period, of what we need to do. Number one, we need to make sure someone's looking at it, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We need to make sure that somebody's paying attention, looking at whether it's the reviews, the Google, the Facebook, the socials, whatever it is. And then if it's not legitimate, maybe here's what we go to next. We take it, we put, ask Chat GPT for a response because it's this platform, and then we can respond. But if it's legitimate, then what's our next step? And most times it is not only to respond to the review and invite that client or that person back for a different experience or somehow to make it right, but then inside of our business, addressing it because it's most likely a training moment, and a way that we can make something, we got to make something good come out of it. But definitely making sure that you have a system in place that everybody is aware of, everybody that's on your team. What do you think, Dad? I know you like a system.
Well, that's what I think, addressing somewhat earlier, is that, making, first of all, make sure somebody is looking at it, if it's not yourself, and monitoring it and tracking it. Um, but also, yeah, just figuring out what's, how to respond, what's your system for responding. So, you know, and I really like what you said to Stacy about, those different social media platforms, can be addressing a different demographic. So how you address maybe a bad review or a complaint, might look a little differently, depending on what platform that is because of the demographic that it's reaching, and I'm not an expert on any of that, but I would say, for example, TikTok might be a little bit more of a younger demographic. So maybe obviously the language you would use there, Facebook, Instagram, maybe something different there. So again, just making sure you have a system, and then also getting, if you're a person that just doesn't have a lot of people surrounding them, you know, get get some feedback on how maybe you should respond. Let other people, that maybe have some experience, maybe a coach or a mentor, help you with that. Because the last thing you want to do is respond out of emotion, and sometimes if you get something and, and you're fired up about it because it's wrong or it's false or whatever the case may be, and you're angry and start hitting those keys real quick, you know with uh with your response, that might not be the best way to do it either. Certainly coming at it from okay, let me breathe, let me get some input from others to see what's the best way to approach this. It will probably always be the best approach, but I think we've all been guilty of getting, even a simple text from someone, and rather than catching our breath, especially if it's a bit upsetting, we fire something back real quick only to say, oh, wish I'd have thought about that now because I was responding more out of emotion than addressing the situation properly. So that would be another suggestion or another part of that system I would certainly recommend.
Yeah, we definitely always need to be using our emotional intelligence, even though sometimes I don't want to. How about that? But I will, especially since I can still get in trouble with my dad. So I will. That's fine. Um, so Jen, sorry about your computer, but welcome back. It's boring just dad and I here.
Technology is wonderful until it stops working, right?
Exactly.
Which can be so frustrating. But thank
Yeah,
you.
right.
You know, it's funny, I was thinking about how we got a Google review for the business, and I was so confused about this review because they were talking about silence that didn't work here anymore. And so this was like it was a recent post, but it was like a review from years ago that she came. And so obviously the importance of responding is that I could respond and say, that of course we're sorry about your experience with that status doesn't work here anymore, X, Y, and Z. And so I think that's the beauty about responding, or the importance of responding to some of these reviews. It's like anyone reading that can say, okay, well that's just silly for her to leave a review that's so outdated at this point. So I think that's why we kind of always say it's important to respond to reviews no matter what platform they're coming in on, just so it helps people have clarity of the situation when they're deciding to do business with you or not.
Yeah. Well said. I think the whole really, I mean, the main point is we don't have to be scared of it anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're on social media a little bit, eventually you'll come across where people are making specific reply videos about a negative review that wasn't legitimate, or, claiming somebody had bad service or a nasty comment. I mean, they're saying, "Hey, look, let's take a look at you." And so we're living in a day and age where now we don't have to be scared of the feedback, whether it's legitimate or not, and really almost in some ways welcome it, because we, the more people talk about you, guess what? It keeps you at the top either way. So again, we don't want negative reviews. We don't want all of that. We're out here every single day, but good, bad, or indifferent, people are talking about you, at least in the algorithm, it's keeping us at the top, and continue to tell the story of our business. So hopefully some of this conversation has been helpful to our viewers and our listeners. And if you guys have any feedback on maybe, hey, share some stories with us. Have you gotten just absolutely ridiculous feedback and how did you handle it? We'd love to hear how you guys, what's your system in place? So until we see you guys in our next episode, take care. Bye bye.